Jake Morrison sat in his small apartment, drinking coffee and reading reports on his tablet. The morning sun came through his window in downtown Denver. He had been out of the Marines for 2 years now, working as a security consultant for different companies. The pay was good, but he missed the action sometimes. His tablet beeped with a new message. Jake looked at the sender and frowned. It was from Earth Military Command. That was strange. He had left the service cleanly, with no problems. Why would they contact him now? Jake opened the message. It was short and direct. He needed to report to Peterson Space Force Base within 24 hours. The message was marked as urgent and classified. Jake finished his coffee and started packing. Theo. Next morning, Jake walked into a meeting room at the base. 3 people sat at a long table. He recognized General Patricia Kane from news reports. She was the head of Earth's military space operations. The other 2 were officers he did not know. "Sit down, Morrison," General Kane said. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. "We have a situation that requires your specific skills." Jake sat down and waited. He had learned in the Marines to let officers talk first. 3 days ago, we received a communication from something called the Galactic Combat Assessment Bureau, the general continued. They represent a group of alien civilizations. They want to test Earth's military potential. Jake tried not to show his surprise. Aliens were real and they were talking to Earth. This was bigger than anything he had imagined. "The aliens have invited Earth to send 1 representative to their combat trials," General Kane said. "These trials happen every few years. Different species send their best fighters to compete. The winners get respect and better treatment in galactic politics." One of the other officers, a colonel with the name tag Brooks, leaned forward. "The aliens think humans are weak and primitive. They expect us to fail badly. This is their way of putting us in our place." Jake nodded slowly. "What kind of combat trials?" "We don't know all the details," General Kane said. "The aliens were not very helpful with information. They said the trials test survival skills, combat ability, and warrior spirit. The contests take place on an orbital station." She slid a tablet across the table to Jake. On the screen was his military record. It showed his time in the Marines, his combat deployments, and his fitness scores. Everything looked normal to him. "We reviewed the records of every active and former military member," General Kane said. "Your profile came up as the best match for what we think they want. You have excellent hand-to-hand combat skills, survival training, and psychological stability." Jake looked at the 3 officers. "Why not send someone who is still active duty? Someone with more recent training?" Colonel Brooks answered. "The aliens specified they want a warrior, not a soldier. They made it clear they don't care about military rank or current status. They want someone who fights because it's in their nature." General Kane stood up and walked to a window that looked out at the mountains. "Jake, I'm going to be honest with you. We don't know what we're walking into. The aliens might be testing us to see if we're worth talking to, or they might be looking for an excuse to treat us like children." She turned back to face him. "But if someone is going to represent Earth in alien combat trials, we want it to be someone who won't embarrass us. Someone who will show them that humans are not as weak as they think." Jake thought about it for a moment. The idea of fighting aliens in space seemed like something from a movie. But the officers in front of him were serious, and this was really happening. "What happens if I say no?" Jake asked. "We find someone else," General Kane said. "But honestly, you're our first choice by a wide margin." Jake made his decision. "I'll do it." General Kane smiled for the first time since he had entered the room. "Good. You leave tomorrow. Lieutenant Amy Brooks will go with you as our military attaché. She'll handle communications and observe the trials." Jake looked at Colonel Brooks. "Are you related?" "My daughter," Colonel Brooks said with a slight smile. "She speaks 4 alien languages and has a degree in xenology." The meeting continued for another hour. They gave Jake basic information about the aliens he might meet. The Xanthari were proud warriors who looked down on other species. The Corvan Empire relied on technology and cybernetic improvements. There were dozens of other species, each with their own advantages and fighting styles. When the meeting ended, Jake walked outside into the Colorado sunshine. Tomorrow he would leave Earth to fight aliens in space. 6 months ago, his biggest worry was whether he could pay rent on time. Now he was representing his entire species in combat trials. That evening, Jake packed light. He brought basic clothes, personal items, and nothing else. He had no idea what equipment would be available or allowed in the trials. He figured it was better to travel simple and adapt to whatever he found. His phone rang as he was closing his bag. It was his sister in California. "Hey Jake, how are things going?" she asked. Jake looked around his apartment. By tomorrow night, he would be on an alien space station, preparing to fight creatures from other worlds. "Things are about to get interesting," he said. The transport ship docked with the alien station after 3 days of travel. Jake looked out the window at the massive structure floating in space. The station was 10 times larger than anything humans had built. It looked like a giant metal flower with arms reaching out in all directions. Lieutenant Amy Brooks checked her translation device one more time. She was nervous, but tried not to show it. Her father had trusted her with this assignment, and she did not want to let him down. "Remember, Jake," she said quietly. "These aliens think we are primitive. They expect us to be weak and scared. Don't give them what they expect." Jake nodded. He felt calm, like he always did before a mission. The butterflies in his stomach had settled hours ago. Now he was focused on the job ahead. The airlock opened, and they stepped into the alien station. The gravity felt normal, but the air smelled different. It had a metallic taste that made Jake's nose wrinkle. The walls were covered in symbols he could not read, and lights blinked in patterns that hurt his eyes. A tall alien waited for them in the corridor. It had blue skin, 4 arms, and eyes that glowed yellow. When it spoke, Jake's translation earpiece turned the sounds into English. "I am Coordinator Vexithul of the Assessment Bureau," the alien said. Its voice sounded like it was talking through water. "You are the human representatives?" Amy stepped forward. "I am Lieutenant Amy Brooks, military attaché for Earth. This is Jake Morrison, our combat representative." The alien looked at Jake from head to toe. Its expression was hard to read, but Jake got the feeling it was not impressed. Jake wore simple cargo pants, boots, and a plain shirt. Compared to the alien's fancy uniform with metal decorations, he looked very ordinary. "Follow me," Vexthul said. "The other contestants are already here." They walked through corridors filled with aliens Jake had never imagined. Some looked like giant insects with too many legs. Others were made of what looked like living crystal that caught the light and threw rainbows on the walls. One group seemed to be made of pure energy, floating in containment suits. "There are 43 species participating this cycle," Vexthul explained as they walked. "Each has sent their finest warrior. The trials will test combat skill, survival ability, and warrior spirit over 5 days." They entered a large room filled with aliens and their equipment. Jake stopped walking and stared. Every other contestant wore armor that looked like it came from a science fiction movie. Energy shields glowed around some fighters. Others carried weapons that hummed with power. Robotic assistants floated around the contestants, checking equipment and running diagnostics. A group of tall aliens with silver skin noticed Jake and Amy. They wore black armor covered in spikes and carried weapons that crackled with electricity. One of them approached. "I am war leader Zextar of the Zenthari Confederacy," the alien said. Its voice was deep and threatening. "Are you the human warrior?" Jake looked up at the alien. Zextar was at least 7 feet tall and built like a tank. The armor made him look even bigger. "I'm Jake Morrison," Jake said calmly. Zextar looked at Jake's simple clothes and laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Where is your armor, human? Your weapons? Your support team?" Other aliens began to notice the conversation. They gathered around to see what was happening. Jake heard clicking sounds, electronic beeps, and other noises that his translator could not handle. "I don't have armor or weapons," Jake said. The crowd of aliens made various sounds that Jake guessed were laughter. A creature made of crystal stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes. "Surely you misunderstand the nature of these trials, soft flesh being," the crystal alien said. "This is combat testing, not a social gathering." Jake looked around at all the advanced equipment. Every other contestant looked like they could fight a small war by themselves. He was starting to understand why General Kane had been worried. Amy moved closer to Jake. She could see the other aliens treating him like a joke. Some were pointing at him and making sounds she was sure were insults. Vexthal approached with a tablet in one of its 4 hands. There seems to be confusion about your equipment, Human Morrison. The trials begin in 1 hour. Do you need time to retrieve your combat gear? Jake shook his head. I don't have any combat gear. This is what I brought. The coordinator looked confused. It checked its tablet several times. The records show Earth was informed about the nature of these trials. Combat between armed warriors wearing appropriate protection. We understood, Jake said. This is how I fight. More aliens gathered around them. Jake could feel their eyes on him. Some seemed confused, others amused. A few looked like they felt sorry for him. An insect-like alien with 6 arms clicked its mandibles together. When it spoke, the translator made its voice sound buzzing and angry. The human mocks the trials, it said. This is disrespectful to all warriors present. Jake felt his temper start to rise, but he kept his voice calm. I'm not mocking anything. I'm here to compete. Zextar stepped closer to Jake. The alien was so tall that Jake had to look up to meet its eyes. Human, you will die in the first trial, the Zenthari said. Your species will be marked as unfit for warrior status. You will bring shame to your entire world. Jake looked around at all the aliens staring at him. Their advanced armor and weapons were impressive. But Jake had learned something important in the Marines. The most dangerous weapon was the mind of the person using it. We'll see, Jake said quietly. The crowd of aliens made more sounds of amusement and disbelief. They began to walk away, losing interest in what they saw as a foolish human who did not understand what he was facing. Amy stayed close to Jake as the aliens dispersed. Are you sure about this? She whispered. Jake watched the other contestants checking their equipment one final time. In an hour, he would find out if General Kane had made the right choice, I'm sure, he said. The first trial chamber was huge. Jake stood at the entrance and looked at what waited inside. The room looked like a jungle from Earth, but everything was wrong. The trees were too tall and twisted in strange ways. The plants had colors that did not exist in nature. Steam rose from pools of bubbling liquid scattered around the floor. Vexthal spoke to all the contestants through speakers in the walls. The survival trial will test your ability to stay alive in hostile conditions. You have 30 minutes to survive everything the chamber throws at you. Elimination comes from death, unconsciousness, or surrender. Jake pulled off his shirt and boots. He wanted to move freely without anything getting caught or torn. The other contestants stared at him like he had lost his mind. Amy watched from the observation deck above. Her hands gripped the railing as she saw Jake preparing to enter the deadly chamber wearing only his pants. The trial begins now, Vexthal announced. Jake stepped into the chamber along with 15 other contestants. The door sealed behind them with a loud clang. Immediately, the air became thick and hot. Jake could taste metal and something else he could not identify. The other aliens spread out through the artificial jungle. Their armor systems activated, creating energy shields and environmental protection. Weapons powered up with humming sounds. Jake heard the mechanical whir of targeting systems locking onto threats. Something moved in the trees above them. Jake looked up and saw mechanical creatures that looked like a cross between spiders and snakes. They had metal bodies with glowing red eyes and moved through the branches like liquid. The first attack came from above. 3 of the robot predators dropped onto a crystal warrior. The aliens' shields flared as the machines tried to break through. Energy weapons fired, filling the air with bright flashes and the smell of burned metal. Jake moved deeper into the jungle. His bare feet felt the ground better than boots would have. He could tell where the surface was soft or hard, wet or dry. When a robot dropped toward him from a tree, he felt the vibration through his feet before he heard the sound. Jake rolled sideways as the machine hit the ground where he had been standing. The robot was fast, but Jake was faster. He grabbed a broken branch from the ground and jammed it into the creature's sensor cluster. Sparks flew as the machine stopped moving. More robots appeared from all directions. The jungle filled with the sounds of combat. Energy weapons fired constantly. Alien voices shouted in languages Jake could not understand. Metal clashed against metal as the contestants fought for their lives. A group of insect aliens worked together near a large tree. Their armor was thick and strong, but the robots found weak spots at the joints. One insect warrior fell as his leg armor cracked under repeated attacks. Jake kept moving. He had learned in the Marines that staying still in a fight was a good way to die. The robots seemed to track movement and heat, so he used the steam from the bubbling pools to confuse their sensors. The crystal warriors were having trouble. Their hard bodies were strong, but they moved slowly. The robots surrounded them and attacked from multiple angles. Jake watched one crystal being cracked under the pressure and fall to its knees. 10 minutes into the trial, Jake realized something important. The other contestants were getting tired. Their heavy armor was making them slow. Their energy weapons were using power that had to come from somewhere. But Jake felt fine. He was sweating from the heat, but his muscles felt loose and ready. A large robot, bigger than the others, emerged from behind a twisted tree. It looked like a metal bear with too many arms and claws that sparked with electricity. The machine focused on Jake and charged straight at him. Jake did not try to fight the robot head-on. Instead, he ran toward one of the bubbling pools. The robot followed, its heavy feet shaking the ground. At the last second, Jake jumped sideways. The robot could not stop in time and crashed into the pool. Steam exploded upward as the machine hit the bubbling liquid. Electrical systems shorted out with loud pops and flashes. The robot thrashed for a few seconds, then went still. Jake heard screaming from across the chamber. One of the Zenthari warriors was surrounded by spider robots. His armor was cracked and sparking. Energy leaked from broken seals in his suit. Without thinking, Jake ran toward the alien. He picked up pieces of destroyed robots as he moved. When he reached the Zenthari, Jake threw metal fragments at the spider machines to get their attention. The robots turned toward Jake. He led them away from the injured alien and toward another bubbling pool. This time, Jake grabbed a long piece of metal pipe and used it to knock the robots into the liquid one by one. The Zenthari warrior stared at Jake in shock. No one had ever helped him in combat before. His people believed that asking for help was a sign of weakness. 20 minutes. Into the trial, half the contestants were down. Some had been knocked unconscious by the robots. Others had surrendered when their equipment failed. Jake was still moving, still fighting, and still looked ready for more. The remaining aliens began to notice that the human was not slowing down. His bare skin was covered in sweat and dirt, but his movements were still quick and smooth. While their powered armor systems overheated and their energy weapons ran low, Jake adapted to each new challenge. A group of energy beings in containment suits gathered near the center of the chamber. Their suits were advanced, but the constant fighting was draining their power systems. Jake saw them struggling and moved to help. He could not communicate with them directly, but actions spoke louder than words. Jake used his metal pipe to destroy robots that threatened the energy beings. In return, they used their remaining power to clear a path through a swarm of smaller machines. With 5 minutes left in the trial, only 6 contestants remained standing. Jake was one of them. The others were a Zenthari warrior, 2 crystal beings, and 2 heavily armored aliens from species Jake did not recognize. The final wave of robots was the largest yet. Dozens of machines poured out of hidden openings in the walls. They moved like a pack, coordinating their attacks and learning from the mistakes of the earlier waves. Jake looked around at his fellow survivors. They were all exhausted. Their equipment was damaged and running low on power. But they were still alive, and that meant they could still fight. The human smiled as the robots approached. This was what he had trained for his entire life. The second trial took place in a zero-gravity chamber. Jake floated near the entrance, watching the other contestants struggle with the lack of weight. Many aliens came from planets with heavy gravity and had never learned to move without it. Jake felt comfortable in the weightless environment. The Marines had trained him in zero-gravity combat during his service. He knew how to use walls and objects to push himself in the right direction. More importantly, he understood how to fight when there was no up or down. 8 contestants had survived the jungle trial. Besides Jake, there were 2 crystal beings, a Xanthari warrior, 2 insect-like Vexhi, and 2 aliens in powered armor from the Corvan Empire. Each group stayed together, eyeing the others with suspicion. Vex Thul's voice came through the speakers, again. The second trial tests combat ability in unusual conditions. You will face each other in direct competition, the last 3 standing advanced to the final trial. Floating weapons appeared throughout the chamber. Energy rifles, plasma swords, and force shields drifted within reach of the contestants. Jake watched the others grab for the weapons eagerly. He chose a simple metal bar about 3 feet long. The Corvan warriors laughed at Jake's choice. Their powered armor had built-in weapons and targeting systems. They could fire energy blasts and deploy protective shields with thought commands. To them, Jake looked like a primitive trying to fight jets with a stick. The trial began without warning. One of the Corvan warriors immediately fired an energy blast at Jake. In normal gravity, the blast would have been hard to dodge, but in zero gravity, Jake pushed off a floating piece of debris and spun out of the way. The energy blast hit one of the crystal beings instead. The crystal warrior shattered into dozens of pieces that floated through the chamber like deadly confetti. Jake realized that friendly fire was allowed in this trial. The 2 Vexhi insects worked together, using their multiple arms to grab weapons while their wings let them fly through the weightless space. They surrounded one of the remaining crystal beings and attacked from all sides. Jake pushed off a wall and flew toward the Corvan warrior who had shot at him. The alien tried to target Jake with his armor's weapons, but Jake moved in 3 dimensions, never staying in one place long enough to be hit. When Jake reached the Corvan, he wrapped his legs around the alien's armored waist and used his metal bar to pry at the helmet seals. The alien panicked and fired his weapons wildly, trying to shake Jake loose. The Corvan's wild shots hit one of the Vexhi insects, sending the creature spinning across the chamber. The insect crashed into a wall and went limp. Its partner screamed, in anger, and flew at the Corvan warrior. Jake let go of the Corvan and pushed away as the surviving Vexhi attacked. The insect alien had 6 arms, each holding a different weapon. Energy blasts, plasma bolts, and force projectiles filled the space around the Corvan warrior. The Corvan's armor held for a few seconds, then began to crack under the constant barrage. Jake watched as the alien's sophisticated systems failed, one by one. When the armor's power ran out, the Vexhi finished the fight with a plasma sword through the chest. Now only 4 contestants remained. Jake, the angry Vexhi, the Xanthari warrior, and the second Corvan. They floated in different parts of the chamber, each waiting for someone else to make the first move. Jake studied his remaining opponents. The Vexhi was skilled but angry, which made it unpredictable. The Xanthari was calm and experienced, a dangerous combination. The second Corvan had learned from his partner's mistake and was keeping his distance. The Xanthari warrior made the next move. He grabbed a plasma rifle and fired at the Vexhi. The insect dodged, but the blast caught one of its wings. The creature spun out of control and crashed into a cluster of floating weapons. Jake saw his opportunity. He pushed off from his current position and flew toward the disoriented Vexhi. The insect tried to bring its weapons to bear, but Jake's metal bar knocked 2 guns out of its hands before it could fire. The fight between Jake and the Vexhi was brutal. The alien had more arms and natural weapons, but Jake had better control, in zero gravity. He used the chamber's walls and floating objects to change direction suddenly, staying out of reach of the insect's claws and remaining weapons. Jake finally ended the fight by wrapping his metal bar around the Vexhi's neck and using leverage to snap the creature's spine. The insect went limp and floated away. 3 contestants remained. The Xanthari warrior nodded at Jake with what might have been respect. The alien had watched Jake defeat 2 opponents using only a metal bar and superior movement. The second Corvan decided to end the trial quickly. He activated his armor's most powerful weapon, a plasma cannon that could destroy small ships. The weapon needed time to charge, but when it fired, nothing could survive the blast. Jake and the Xanthari realized the danger at the same time. They both moved, but in zero gravity there was nowhere to hide. The plasma cannon would fill the chamber with deadly energy. Jake had one chance. He threw his metal bar at the Corvin's helmet as hard as he could. The bar struck just as the plasma cannon fired. The impact knocked the Corvin's aim off by a few degrees. Instead of filling the chamber with death, the plasma blast hit the trial's control systems. Lights went out, gravity generators failed completely, and emergency alarms began blaring throughout the station. In the darkness and confusion, Jake felt someone grab his arm. It was the Zenthari warrior. Instead of attacking, the alien pulled Jake toward the chamber's exit. When the emergency lights came on, Jake and the Zenthari were floating near the door. The second Corvin was unconscious, his armor's systems fried. By feedback from his own weapon, Bexthol's voice crackled through damaged speakers. Trial complete. 2 contestants advanced to the final trial. Jake looked at the Zenthari warrior who had helped him survive. The alien's yellow eyes met his, and Jake saw something he had not expected. Respect? Amy's voice came through Jake's communicator. Jake, are you okay? The whole station shook when that weapon fired. Jake touched the communication device. I'm fine, Amy. 2 trials down, 1 to go. But as he looked at the Zenthari warrior, Jake wondered if his toughest opponent was standing right next to him. The final trial arena was different from the others. It was a simple circular room with white walls and bright lights. No weapons floated in the air. No environmental hazards waited to kill the contestants. Just 2 warriors and empty space. Jake stood on one side of the circle. Across from him, the Zenthari warrior removed his damaged armor piece by piece. The alien's silver skin showed scars from many battles. His muscles were lean and powerful, built for fighting. I am Vordak of the Zenthari Confederacy, the alien said. His voice was calm and respectful. I have won these trials 3 times. You have impressed me, human Jake Morrison. Jake nodded. You saved my life in the last trial. Why? Vordak stretched his long arms and rolled his shoulders. Because you fight with honor. You helped fallen warriors when you could have let them die. That is the mark of a true fighter. In the observation deck, hundreds of aliens watched the final match. Amy pressed her face against the glass, her heart pounding as she looked down at Jake. He seemed so small compared to the Zenthari warrior. Vexthal spoke through the arena speakers. The final trial is combat between the last 2 contestants. No weapons, no armor, no assistance. Victory comes through surrender, unconsciousness, or death. Jake and Vordak began to circle each other slowly. The Zenthari was taller and had longer reach, but Jake had learned not to judge opponents by size alone. Every fighter had strengths and weaknesses. Vordak moved first. He was fast for such a large being, crossing the distance between them in 2 quick steps. His first punch came at Jake's head with enough force to break bones. Jake ducked under the punch and stepped inside Vordak's reach. He drove his elbow into the alien's ribs, but it felt like hitting solid rock. The Zenthari's skin was tougher than it looked. Vordak grabbed Jake's shoulder and threw him across the arena. Jake hit the wall hard but rolled with the impact. He came to his feet just as Vordak charged again. This time Jake was ready. He sidestepped the charge and used Vordak's momentum against him. The alien crashed into the wall where Jake had been, standing. The crowd of aliens made sounds of surprise. Many had expected the human to be crushed quickly. Instead, Jake was matching the experienced Zenthari move for move. The fight continued for several minutes. Vordak was stronger and his skin was harder to damage, but Jake was faster and more flexible. Every time the alien tried to grab him, Jake slipped away and struck back. Both fighters began to show signs of fatigue. Vordak's breathing was heavy and sweat ran down his silver skin. Jake's muscles ached from blocking the alien's powerful attacks. You fight well for a young species, Vordak said during a brief pause, but I have been fighting since before your world knew of other life. Jake wiped blood from his nose. One of Vordak's punches had gotten through his guard. Maybe that's your problem. You fight like you always have. I adapt. The alien smiled, showing sharp teeth. Then show me how you adapt to this. Vordak's skin began to change color, darkening from silver to deep black. His muscles swelled as some kind of biological enhancement activated. When he moved, he was twice as fast as before. Jake barely dodged the first enhanced attack. Vordak's fist left a crack in the wall where Jake's head had been. The second punch caught Jake in the shoulder and sent him spinning across the floor. The crowd of aliens cheered. This was what they had expected to see. The primitive human being overwhelmed by superior alien abilities. Jake struggled to his feet. His left shoulder was numb and probably broken. Vordak advanced slowly, confident that the fight was nearly over. But Jake had noticed something. The alien's enhanced form was burning energy quickly. His breathing was even heavier now, and his movements, while faster, were less controlled. Jake changed his strategy. Instead of trying to attack, he focused on staying alive. He dodged and blocked, letting Vordak waste energy on attacks that missed their target. The alien grew frustrated. His enhanced form was supposed to end fights quickly, not drag them out. He began to make mistakes, throwing wild punches that left him off balance. After 2 more minutes, Vordak's enhancement began to fade. His skin returned to silver and his swollen muscles shrank back to normal size. The alien staggered, exhausted from the energy drain. Jake saw his chance. He rushed forward while Vordak was weak. But instead of attacking, he caught the falling alien and helped him stay on his feet. "Why?" Vordak gasped. "Because you're a warrior," Jake said. "You deserve to lose on your feet, not on your knees." Vordak looked into Jake's eyes and saw something that shocked him. Compassion. Even in the middle of a fight, the human cared about his opponent's dignity. The alien straightened up and raised his fists. "Then let us finish this properly." The final exchange was brutal but brief. Both fighters were exhausted, running on willpower alone. They traded punches until neither could lift their arms. Jake fell first, his knees hitting the arena floor. But Vordak fell a second later, his enhanced form having taken too much out of him. Both warriors tried to stand. Jake made it to one knee. Vordak managed to sit up but could not get his legs under him. The arena was silent. In the observation deck, aliens stared down at the 2 fighters who had given everything they had. Jake forced himself to stand. His legs shook, and he had to put one hand on the wall for support. But he was standing. Vordak looked up at the human and smiled. "I yield," he said clearly. "The human is the victor." The silence broke as hundreds of alien voices erupted in shock, disbelief, and something Jake had not expected to hear. "Respect." Vexthal's voice announced the result. "Jake Morrison of Earth is declared champion of the Galactic Combat Assessment Trials." Jake walked over to Vordak and offered his hand. The alien grasped it, and Jake helped him to his feet. "Your species will go far," Vordak said quietly. "You do not just fight to win, you fight to prove that strength and honor can exist together." Amy's voice crackled through Jake's communicator. She was crying and laughing at the same time. "Jake, you did it. You actually did it." Jake looked up at the observation deck where hundreds of aliens were reassessing everything they thought they knew about humans. Earth would never be seen as a primitive world again. "Yeah," Jake said, still breathing hard. "We did it." In the weeks that followed, Earth received communication requests from dozens of alien civilizations. They wanted trade agreements, military partnerships, and cultural exchanges. The galaxy had learned that humans were not weak or primitive. They were something much more dangerous and valuable. They were survivors from a world that had forged them into warriors who could adapt to anything. Jake returned to Earth as a hero, but more importantly, he had opened the door for his species to take its place among the stars.